It's the Jim and Terry Show. I'm your host, Terry. Absent from the Hobbit Hole is my good friend Jim, who is still recovering from a prolonged bout of whatever it is. Cold, flu, COVID, who knows? Protect yourself. Do what you can to mitigate infectious diseases. Stuff borne on the skin. Make sure you're treating your surfaces, especially things that you might share with others in your household. Things that can be wiped down with the old alcohol-based wipes that we kept during the early years of 2021, 2022. Get back to some of that safe hand-washing practice. Cover your mouth when you cough. Cough into your elbow, not into your hand. Coughing into your hand just puts the stuff that you've got onto your hands, and when you touch stuff, there it goes. Some of the stuff is airborne, so that means distance is important. Safe social distancing. And, or, wearing a mask. Yeah, we're back to that. Have you looked at updating your injections, your vaccinations, your flu shot? Do you get a seasonal flu shot? Nothing wrong with that. People objected to the COVID vaccines because they thought erroneously, unscientifically, undata-like, that there was a problem with the development of the vaccine for COVID. Well, this is years later, and the new round is coming out for the latest strain. It's sort of taken for granted that it's going to be like a flu shot. Will the government still pay for it to keep us safe? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how this rolls out in the provincial government of Ontario with Doug Ford. I think he's more interested in letting people dig tunnels for highways. At least that seems to be the latest thing on the provincial scene. Did you know that one of the companies in the bidding for such a project under the feasibility study is one that has, as one of its chair people, Oleg Deripaska. Remember that name? Russian oligarch, in tight with Putin, showing up in an Ontario bid to build a tunnel? Really? It's kind of interesting. Strange coincidence, or is it business as usual in the Ford government, where who you know and who pays you for knowing seems to be in the inside track to a lot of provincial resources, taxpayer resources. I'm not happy about anything public going to anything private. But maybe that's just me. If you are celebrating, as I am, the demise of Pierre Poilievre and the CPC's bid to unseat the Liberals yesterday, the vote was taken on a partisan basis. Everybody else but the Conservative Party voted for Pierre Poilievre's speech-based motion to defeat the Liberal government. Vote of non-confidence. Everybody ganged up on Pierre Poilievre. I don't look on it as a confidence vote in Trudeau and the current government. I look on it as a confidence vote about Pierre Poilievre and his leadership. He's tried, I think I mentioned this last podcast, 135 times, motion of non-confidence, defeated each and every time. So it's pretty obvious to me that Canadians, at least those elected in the houses, the House of Commons, at least they are not impressed by Pierre Poilievre's leadership. But it seems like he's got control, because I don't think there was one errant Conservative vote. Not one dissenter. I'm a little concerned about that. As with other things I am concerned about, and I was going to talk, I mentioned in a couple of podcasts ago, about carbon tax and how does that work, because there seems to be a lot of misinformation. Information from Pierre Poilievre himself that the carbon tax is really going to break Canada's inflation back. Do you know inflation's been falling for the past 6 months to a year? It has made Canada the envy of the G7, and yet the amount that we pay on carbon tax is supposed to be going up incrementally, but you would never know that because you think that carbon tax is the root of all evil in terms of inflation. But as inflation has been going down, carbon tax has been rising. Did you notice it? Maybe you didn't. I got gas at the pump for the lowest I've seen it in maybe 6 to 8 months. Certainly not as low as it got when it broke the dollar barrier back at the beginning of COVID. In fact, it got to be negative numbers where the demand was so low they should have been paying us to pump gas. But that's another story. Let's get back to carbon pricing. Carbon pricing, not really a tax. It is not a tax. It's the price of using fossil fuels as we try to transform our production, our means of production, our fuel of the industry of production from carbon-based to something else, whether it's some form of green energy. We're going to look for different sources. There will not be every industry that's able to change and make a transformation, but as much as is possible, let's try to make it happen with the belief that climate change is real, it's measurable, it's quantifiable, it's predictable. We know the root causes, we know how to fix it. We have some technology that's in the wings that may be working towards reducing to zero the emissions of fossil fuel production, but it's not there yet. Instead, we put a price on continuing to use carbon fuels. And I went to the David Suzuki. You might know him from a lot of environmental issues over a lifetime of contribution to Canada in service of Canadians and what is best for Canada and the environment. And he outlines the whole thing on his website. I'll provide a link to the davidsuzuki.org page on climate change and carbon pricing. For consumers, he says, carbon pricing increases the cost of burning polluting fossil fuels and encourages you to explore cheaper alternatives. Effective carbon pricing rises regularly to give people and businesses time to make slow adjustments. The carbon levy started in 2019 at $20 per ton, went up $10 a year to $50 a ton in 2022, and it's now increasing by $15 per ton until 2030. Well, what does that mean? It sounds like a big punch in the gut. What does it mean at the gas pump? The most recent increase that went into effect, the original price was $20 per ton in 2019. It's now $80 per ton in 2024. That price, even though it sounds huge, adds about 3 cents to a liter of gasoline, and I got mine for $1.30 something this weekend. Yeah, lowest price I've seen in a while. And yet at the same time, the carbon price is rising. Do farmers pay carbon tax? There's a big misconception. No, farmers don't pay it on their fuel. Fuel used in the production of food, in the transportation of food. So there are some things that are misrepresented and people don't understand it. So when you get Pierre Poilievre saying, axe the tax, it sounds really, like taxes are bad. No, taxes are good, and they serve the common good or commonwealth. What are the benefits of carbon pricing? Reducing emissions, it encourages us to look for alternatives and causes businesses to look for alternative and more effective and efficient ways of doing business. Speeds up the transition to renewables, that's the whole point. Supports new technologically advanced jobs. We have the big EV plant, I think it's going in Alliston, correct me if I'm wrong. Federal government responsible for helping build and maintain and offer the jobs to Canadian workers. Doug Ford, he came along for the ride. It's not his initiative. It's the federal government looking at this stuff. Give the feds credit where credit is due. Now, if there's a problem, point that out too. Does every province have the right to do its own method of managing carbon pricing? Yes, they do. BC has their own, and so does Quebec. So it's possible to do it on your own, to do it without the federal umbrella. However, the federal umbrella is the minimal expectation, not the maximum, the minimal. It's the least we can do, and yet most provinces are still under the shackles, the chain, the ball and chain of oil and gas. and beholden to them. So anyway, it's just interesting to think of carbon pricing, what's out there. You can check it out on the David Suzuki Foundation to find out what's the real cost of doing business. And it's not going to break the bank. It isn't going to break the household budget. It will add about or less than 3 cents to a liter of gasoline, which is about 0.2% of the cost of the liter. So there you go. Keep it all in perspective. Axe the tax? I don't think so. Does Pierre Poilievre know what he's talking about? I don't think so either. Seems like Canadians don't believe him either. So beware of the polls that say he's got a double-digit lead over the Liberals, and be aware that can you ever be tired of good government? Can you ever be tired of policies that help and promote promote and support the wellness of most Canadians? Yeah, can you get tired of that? I don't. I don't get ever tired of winning. I don't get tired of seeing Canada represented on the world stage in positive ways. I don't get tired of seeing Trudeau receive the Ukrainian Medal of Honor on behalf of all Canadians who are supporting our pro-Ukrainian policies. Pro-Ukraine happens to be the opposite of pro-Putin. And you have to wonder to what extent those who disagree with Justin Trudeau are in the pocketbooks, receiving payola, receiving money, receiving influence, propaganda from Russia. Yeah, Russia ain't going away anytime soon, and it's been 8 years going on. Well, I think it was 2016, Russia. The suspicion of involvement in influence peddling, manipulation of social media to the detriment of democracy, where we need an informed electorate, not a blind electorate. What's the quote? I know it sounds trite to say, but it comes down to something like this. There are none so blind as those who refuse to see. Open your eyes and measure the data. Measure the science. Measurement. It's all about what you believe to be true and what you believe with evidence. Stick to the evidence. Stick to the science. Carbon pricing is not a tax. It's pricing in the cost of polluting. It's got to be good in that. Good for all. Necessary for some, good for all. The Jim and Tara Show, signing off. Bye-bye.